Kevork Almassian, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure, my friend.
We have built a number of friendships over the last few years. Thanks actually to the whole lockdown thing.
Indeed. And back then, this was an opportunity, in my opinion, for the people to come together and connect together, especially that era was supposed and it was planned to separate between the people, to find vertical lines among the people, to turn the people against each other. So we needed also a coalition of people, let's say, to push back against the trend of turning the people against each other so that they would be busy with these side fights. Meanwhile, the people in power, they're grabbing all the power and all the money from the people. Meanwhile, we were discussing if we should wear a mask or not.
If I look at my work as a political cartoonist, I mean, I've got books published. I was very, very mainstream in my views, and I've only swung in the last few years. And what worries me is, why is it that I held those views? And not just me, why is it that so many in the mainstream held perhaps the wrong side of history views? Is that a result of just Western propaganda?
I just want to say that I have never intended to become an expert on Syria. This was not even in the corner of my head, or I didn't want to, let's say, hyper-focus on one issue. It was the imposed war on us in Syria and the injustices inflicted upon the Syrian people. When you are, for example, in 2012, at the beginning of the war, you're in Aleppo, and you see with your own objective eyes something is happening in front of your eyes. And then when you turn on your TV to the mainstream press, and especially Al Jazeera or the English-speaking TV outlets, because I used to also speak English back then, you notice a stark difference. There is sometimes an 180-degree difference between what is happening on the ground and what they're reporting. So this starts like out of curiosity, why are they doing this? I thought that the naive me back then in 2012, so we're talking about 13 years ago, that maybe they don't know. Maybe these journalists really do not know what is happening. So what I did, basically, I contacted the mainstream journalists. I contacted Arwa Damon of CNN. I contacted Hala Gorani of CNN. And back then, one of them was in Damascus. So I received a phone call and from a CNN journalist asking me what happened today in Aleppo because there was an anti-Assad protest somewhere. And I reported about it. I told her what I saw with my own objective eyes. And at night, when I read the article on CNN, for me, it was this, the shock factor that all of a sudden you see that you told her something and she reported completely something else. So I started questioning, like, are they really doing this on purpose or not? So since then, I created a group on Facebook called Syria Now News and Analysis. Back then, it wasn't Syria Analysis. It was called Syria Now. So we're reporting what's happening in Syria now in English. And since then, people started to look to alternative news sources, coming to Facebook to read in the group what I and other people are posting there. But this was more like an activism because we were very young and we were very, let's say, sensational, more than we're trying to deliver all the facts because we want only to debunk what the mainstream media is doing. But this has developed through time that you become at the point where you can stay as an activist, or you take one step ahead and study the documents, for example, leaked by the American memos, Defense Intelligence Agency, CIA leaked documents, books, reading to understand all these things. I had professors and I had mentors. Lots of people were teaching me Syria. But the political analysis of what is happening now in the country is in my opinion, you cannot really rely on scholars and on the theorists and the people who studied the books, studied the history of Syria, because most of the people, in my experience, were, I call them prisoners of their books. So you have a professor who studied 15 years as a historian, political science, etc., but he studied it through the books. And who has written these books? And why these books exist in the library and not other books? So I started questioning a lot. So I went into this rabbit hole. Why this professor is telling me, who is my supervisor, that what is happening in Syria is a democratic revolution. Meanwhile, my eyes tell it's otherwise, right? So I went into this phase of rebellion, let's say, against this establishment academia and historians and like the so-called strategic experts. Like they host them on TV outlets. So I told to myself that this is an opportunity for me to become someone who is giving people also solid facts about what is going on in Syria, even if these solid facts are sometimes subjective. Because this is my opinion based on certain realities which I saw in my own eyes. And then you see after 7-8 years of consistent work, like you are daily telling them what is going on, not only in Syria, but the Middle East, reporting. I have over 1,010 or 1,020 videos on YouTube. So people are not stupid. People can see patterns. People can see that after 7 years, someone X who works for a think tank that receives funding from government A, government B, donor A, donor B, which he has basically invested interest in Syria, unlike someone who comes from Syria and is telling you something on his YouTube channel, whose sole funding are the people watching it. There is a big difference for them to see that when I say, if this happens, then this will lead into this. And then in a few days or a few weeks, when they see that what I predicted based on these realities that I'm trying to discuss actually happened, they say, oh, Kevork predicted it. But it's not like prediction based on reading the stars. It's a prediction based on reading the sequences of events and knowing the history of the region, which is basically turning out to be true. So that's how you gain credibility among the people. And that's why the people tune in and they call you an expert on Syria. Although I had no intention at all to become an expert on this issue. My dream was to become a diplomat representing my country in the UN. My dream was to become an ambassador representing the interests of my country. But those are all faded away. I'm not like regretting to have this current career. But in an ideal world, I wouldn't have become someone talking on YouTube. I would have been a diplomat for sure.
When I was on Alex Jones's show, recently, he called me an expert. And I said, I'm not an expert. And he said, no. If you live there and you experience something, that is certainly a metric by which you can be referred to as an expert. And I think that's quite true, because everybody these days is an expert and they've never even been or spent time in the area that they are reporting on.
Yes. Look, it is very important for someone, for example, if this someone wants to become an expert on Syria, to at least know the communities in Syria. Syrians are not like one unique people. There is a concept that Syria is like a nation. And I would like to say something about this. Syria has never been a nation. Historically, we spoke this also offline. The history of Syria goes to the biblical times. And we know that
it's
Damascus...
very important. It's an extremely important country. Yeah.
Yes, but there was no state called Syria in history, right? And this is a new construct after the independence of Syria from the French occupier. But Damascus, for example, the current capital of Syria, is the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. It was mentioned early in the Bible, for example, in Genesis 14:15, and is closely associated with Abraham whose servant Eliezer was from Damascus. It is also attributed to the conversion of Saint Paul. Saint Paul, who on the road to Damascus, he converted, and this was a pivotal moment in New Testament history. For example, Syria nowadays includes a town called Ma'lula, and Ma'lula is, up until this moment, they speak Aramaic, which is the language of Jesus Christ. So it has a big significance from historical and biblical perspective. I understand it. But there was no empire which said, this is Syria and this was the Syrian Empire. This was a new construct after the French mandate. So in this case, we had different types of tribes, people, sects, religions, ethnicities, etc. The French came and said, so we decided today that you guys are all Syrians. And this was something that was very new for the Syrians, to have a national identity, because before that they lived under French occupation, and before that 400 years of Ottoman occupation, and before that Umayyad and Abbasid and Safavid and so many other the Greeks and Romans, so many different empires passed through Syria. Now, under such circumstances, we have a new country where you have over 22, 23 different components coming together calling themselves Syrians, right? So if you're not in Syria, and if you haven't socialized with these different people, you will not know that the people in Deir ez-Zor are very different from the people in Aleppo. You will not know that the people in Aleppo are very different from the people in Damascus. Very different. And we speak the same language with different dialects, but we have different mentalities, we have different cuisines, we have different cultures, we have different music. It's a mosaic, as we call it.
It sounds like South Africa.
Exactly. But the difference is that after World War II, Syrians were given this piece of land to govern themselves, right? Supposedly. But the Syrians have never governed themselves before. They were governed by other powers. So this was a new experience also for them to manage a state and govern all these people together. That's why between the 1948, since the independence of Syria, till 1970, this era was the most unstable era in the history of modern Syria, because they witnessed around 10 coups d'etats. Like every 2 weeks, somebody turns against each other and they're like, now I'm the leader. You have to worship me, And here, where the Americans, one of the first CIA-led coups d'etats in the history of the CIA was in Syria. And they brought Hosni Zaim as a president of the country because they wanted to for Syria to make peace with Israel, and they were creating a Middle Eastern alliance, a countries of alliances against the Soviet Union. And Syria back then rejected it, so they engineered the coup. So the history of the coup d'etats and regime change operations goes back 70, 80 years back in history in Syria. It's nothing new. But these coup d'etats, after 10 coup d'etats, the last one was done by the father of Bashar, Hafiz al-Assad. And since the 1970s, Syria witnessed, let's say, political stability, which means there was a regime imposing its rule on the people, has established political authoritarianism. It has given the people the economic opportunity, cultural and societal freedoms, but don't come close to politics. We give you very cheap food, medication, fuel, healthcare. You study till PhD for free with good education. You get your fuel for very cheap prices. You get your meat for very cheap prices. People were happy, mostly. But some people wanted more, wanted political freedoms. But then the political people who wanted political freedoms, they themselves were not Democrats. So this is the problem with Syria. The people who rised against the political authoritarianism in Syria under the leadership of Hafez, they themselves were not Democrats because they were belonging to the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood never believed in democracy. They believed in elections to reach to power. Once they reach to power, which is like a train, you jump into the train, which is elections, you reach to power, and then you jump out of the train and you create a theocracy. This is what Jolani is doing nowadays, right? Therefore, although Jolani didn't come with elections too, he came also after a coup d'etat, and this is something we could discuss later in our conversation. So, under such circumstances, the Hafez regime, they cracked down on this Islamist scene, completely crushed them in 82, after they created an Islamic Emirate in Syria, in Aleppo and in Hama, similar to what is happening nowadays. Now, under Bashar, when Bashar came and succeeded power, he came from London. He is an ophthalmologist. He married Asma, who was born and raised in Britain, although she is Syrian descent, and her family are all Syrians. But they came from a place where they studied and lived with progressive values. So he came with a confrontational, let's say, attitude towards the people, thinking that these people need to be socially reformed. So he started opening up the society, liberalizing the economy, and this created him lots of backlash and lots of enemies in the country because many people were not ready to accept these progressive values, and especially among the more conservative people, and especially among the Muslim people. That's why even under Bashar's rule at the beginning of the few years, the clergies, they opposed his reforms. For example, he opened a casino in Syria. It was a big issue. It was a big issue. They made a big issue out of it because gambling is haram under Islam. I understand it. I understand where they're coming from. But my approach is, you see gambling as a haram, and I don't gamble. I'm not a Muslim. And I could join you in efforts saying, I don't like gambling. But there are people who like gambling, and you should give them the right to gamble. And this is the same thing with alcohol. I don't drink alcohol, my friend, not out of religious reasons. I don't like it.
I'm very sorry to hear, Kevork.
Yeah, I don't like it. I feel it always makes me sick when I drink it, and I feel it's a poison. That's just me. But if someone, my father drinks alcohol, my brother drinks alcohol, everybody around me drink alcohol, I'm not coming to the table and telling them I don't preach the how horrible alcohol is, because most of the time people who drink alcohol, they're like, why are you not drinking alcohol? You know, are you pussy? You know, you're sorry for the terminologies, you know, like, are you not a man? Why are you not drinking alcohol? It's like, yeah, but it has nothing to do with me being a man, you know. Anyways, what I'm trying to say, Bashar came with confrontational attitude against this type of values, and it didn't work out for him well. So he started making a U-turn again. He realized that the people cannot be reformed this way. So he started giving them more mosques and more Islamic teachings. What you want is, like, he started just appeasing them. And this has created more mosques in Syria than universities, more mosques in Syria than schools. And I'm not against the mosques, so nobody would misinterpret it that. However, I believe when you are a smaller country with smaller resources, and when in the region, the countries who have hijacked the Islamic teachings are basically Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Qatar, and when the money is in the hands of Saudi Arabia, of Qatar, then they're the ones who are going to be able to project their interpretations and their teachings on the rest of the region. And we have an experience, a history behind it in Afghanistan. What did they do in Afghanistan? They brought all the mujahideen from all around the world into Afghanistan with the money of Saudi Arabia. So we know that there is a history behind it, that Saudi Arabia can and could radicalize the youth in the Islamic world. And this was, in my opinion, the fatal mistake when you build. We have 13,500 mosques in Syria for 24 million people, out of which, of course, you have 30 to 40% were minorities. So you have built enormous number of mosques. And then the political money comes, the petrodollar comes. Saudi Arabia and Qatar, they start inviting these clergymen, these sheikhs, this imam, giving them free trips to Saudi Arabia to go to Hajj and bring with them 50 people. What do you think is going to happen through time? They're going to buy influence in the country. And this imam is going to go to the podium and talk to 200, 300 people, and likewise 13,500 mosques. And this is what happened in 2011. This is where I'm leading with this conversation. The vast majority of the experts on Syria do not tell us that 99% of the anti-Assad demonstrations and protests erupted from the mosques. Every Friday after the prayer, they used to go from the mosques. So who is funding the mosque? And who is urging this imam to call for the people to demonstrate and protest against the political authoritarianism? And if this comes from the mosque, where will this lead when the regime change happens? Those are legitimate questions. And I said, if the revolution starts from the mosque, then the outcome will be that this is going to be an Islamic rule. Where is the controversy in that? And that was called an Assadist talking point. So fast forward in 2025, my friend, who turned out to be correct. Because it's logical. It's not like somebody needs to be really an expert or a genius to understand that when you have 60,000 people, this is the biggest number of people who demonstrated at one time against Assad were 60,000 people. And this happened in Hama. And why it is in Hama? Because in 82, the Muslim Brotherhood uprising started from Hama. And this was the place where they started an Islamic emirate in Hama. And this is where Hafez al-Assad crashed this Islamist uprising and insurgency in 82. So if you don't know the history, you will not know why most people demonstrated in the city of Hama, also against Bashar. Anyways, because of this, let's say, context and background, it was easy to see that if they remove Assad from power, this is not going to lead into a Western-style democracy or a Switzerland or not even a Singapore, because this is what the anti-Assad people all the time say. Once we remove Assad from power, we will make a Singapore of the Middle East out of Syria. And this is ridiculous, because if you need to create a Singapore, you need the mentality of the people who built Singapore. But when you see who are the people governing Syria nowadays, like Jolani and Shibani and the Ministry of Interior and the intelligence apparatuses and the multinational terrorists in Syria, the maximum they could establish is Afghanistan 2.0. And I'm not trying to insult the people in Afghanistan. I'm saying the ruling party there, who are they? It's the Taliban, right? And these people in Syria who are governing now are worse than Taliban. They are the Al-Qaeda offshoot. They are the partners of Abu Bakr Baghdadi. They are the people who were in Iraq and sending car bombs into Christian and Shia neighborhoods. They're the ones who decapitated countless number of people. They're the ones who executed women in the streets, accusing them of adultery. All documented on videos. The defense minister of Syria, he has an old video from 2014 breaking the statue of Virgin Mary on the floor. Those are the people who are in charge of the country. So what do you expect really from this type of mentality? Then somebody like Charles Lister, who is considered an expert on Syria, for working for a think tank funded by the Gulf countries, he comes and tells you that don't listen to Kevork, this is paid by Assad. This is a projection, because they are paid by people with invested interest to distort these realities and present what is happening in Syria as a progress. This is the worst chapter in the history of Syria. This is the darkest and the bleakest chapter in the history of Syria, and the Syrian people are paying a very, very high price for this choice. Maybe they didn't choose it, I don't know. But now, after that Jolani came, many people act like it's the acceptable thing to accept Jolani. No, it's not. It's not. Imagine your president is the founder of the Al-Qaeda offshoot in Syria. Do you understand the gravity of the issue? Do you understand? I'm talking to the Syrian people. What type of image you are giving about your country to the outside world by having a president like him? Because there was a consistent effort since 9/11 to say all Muslims are terrorists, right? You remember the era of after 9/11 and equate them all to Osama bin Laden. And if you accept someone like Jolani as your president, you are proving their point. You have fallen into the trap they have set for you. By now, they will come and say every time, we gave them the opportunity to govern themselves. We freed them from the tyranny, and they have picked and chose the Al-Qaeda leader. Although they didn't choose him, they were the CIA and the MI6 and the MIT behind Jolani. They brought him to power. But the people celebrated him. That's the problem. So it's also, this is not only politics, you know. You have public opinion in the West, in the East, in the South, in the North, watching what is happening there. And they were like, oh, Syrian people want Jolani? Okay. Which means they're also like Jolani, right? If you want Jolani, you're like Jolani. But Jolani comes and says, I have reformed. Like the last person which I decapitated 10 days ago, that was a phase. I reformed, I'm a diversity friendly, accept me the way I am. And now I'm going to govern a country with 22 different components, and I'm going to be fair with them. I'm going to treat them well. Nice words, right? Those are but all rhetoric, it's talk. The moment he came to power, he killed 1,500 civilians in 3 days. In 3 days. All were Alawites. He massacred them based on their sectarian affiliation because they associated them with Assad. Assad was an Alawite. So they killed them. And they came after the Druze in the south. And the Druze had the United States and Israel on their back. So they shielded themselves. The same goes with the Kurds. They shielded themselves with the Americans. But who is in the back of the Christians and the Alawites? No one. If Jolani kills every single Christian and Alawite in Syria now, nobody will blink an eye. They don't give a fuck about them.
A big portion of the post-independence Syria seems to relate to Islam a lot.
So at the current moment, the Christians of Syria, the percentage of the Christians of Syria dropped 90%, which means we have moved from around 2 million Christianity in Syria into 200,000 Christians in Syria. This is a very small number anyways. So they don't present any obstacle to the rule, to the government, to the regime, or to the Islamists. Now, in my experience in Syria, I have lived there most of my life. I have never encountered in my life racism or prejudice or any type of negative behavior because I was a Christian. From anyone, Muslim, Christian, Jews. It was a situation where people don't care what religion you are because they said al-din mu'amali in Arabic, which means religion is how you treat me. So the way you treat me, I treat you. I don't care if you believe in Muhammad, if you believe in Jesus, if you believe to Isa. It doesn't matter. As long as you treat me well, I treat you well. And the Christians in Syria, and especially the Armenians of Syria, they had a brilliant reputation among the Muslim people. To the extent that my father used to be in an industrial zone, and we were like a second-class business, doing businesses. It's not like we were not in the upper of the tier. We couldn't import from, let's say, from Germany, but we used to buy from the market and resell it in the market. And we used to work in a German business. And what happened is basically people come to our shop and tell my father that we want to buy from you because you're Armenian, because you're Christian, because we know you don't lie and you don't cheat, and we trust you. And when you say this is Chinese, this is Chinese, this is German, this is German. So Muslims used to come and buy from us all the time. And we made our money, we made our fortune thanks to them. We had no problem with them. And on Fridays, they used to go to their prayer. They pray for 1.5 hours, etc. All the country stops from operating. It's okay. It's 1.5 hours per week. No problem. But the moment when you start forcing it on the people, so it's Friday, they're going to pray. So we used to close our shop and sit inside until they finish their prayer, out of respect. But then when the war erupted, the Islamists came, they will force you to close your shop. So they would come to your shop. If you don't close your shop, we will kill you, or we will lynch you in the streets. That's the difference between what Muslim and what an Islamist is. So nowadays, unfortunately speaking, the people governing the country are these radical Islamists. And the Christians have lost trust completely in this government. And they know that this government doesn't see them as equals in the country. And the evidence for it is this latest terrorist attack in the church, in San Elias Church in Damascus, which killed over 30 civilians. I will tell you why. Between 2 to 3 people conducted this terrorist attack. And one of them, the people outside the church, they have seen him crossing a checkpoint of the Jolani regime. And they have seen this person before in their neighborhood 2 weeks ago. He came with loudspeakers on the back of a pickup truck, calling the Christians to convert to Islam. And the people of the district kicked him out of the neighborhood. 2 weeks later, they saw him coming and passing through the checkpoint and walking to the church. And people tried to stop him. And he had a suicide vest. And he went into the church and he blew himself up after he opened fire on the people. Now, this person who 2 weeks ago came and called the people to convert to Islam, people noticed his face. They started asking questions. Who is this person? What is he doing in our neighborhood? And they brought his full name. And they found out that he is an official security personnel in the Jolani regime, which means he's a registered security agent in the Jolani regime. And this person came back to the church and blew himself up among people, killing them. And 15 minutes later, the Jolani regime issued a statement blaming ISIS for the attack. But this was not carried out by ISIS. This was carried out by a man and his colleague. Both of them were part of the Jolani regime. But because they cannot say that, so they blamed ISIS for it quickly. This is a huge sin that they have done against the Christians, because now the Christians cannot trust the judgment of the government if you are not going to hold yourself accountable for what your guy did to us. Secondly, after the bombing, only one Syrian official in the Jolani regime visited the church to deliver the condolences, and this person is Christian herself, because there is one Christian woman in the Jolani cabinet that her handlers told her, she used to live in Canada, you need to come to Damascus. She used to work with them, with the regime change operatives, let's say, for a long time, because we need a woman. We need a woman who is not covered, there is no hijab, and we need a Christian woman in the government. So we give the false impression that this is a multi-culti and diversity-friendly regime. Theater. She went to the church to deliver her condolences. Right? Jolani called on the phone the patriarch and said he is sorry to what happened to the church and to the people. And then he issued a written statement. In the statement, he says he's expressing solidarity and sympathy with the victims of the criminal explosion. Now, when we said you need to be Syrian to understand the mentality and the meanings behind the words that all these pundits do not know. If you're a president of a country and you call this terrorist attack a criminal explosion, you don't call it a terrorist attack and you don't call the victims martyrs in our language, then you are putting them below the martyr status. And in Syria, when somebody is praying to God in a church and gets killed, he's a martyr. Same thing happens to people who worshiping in the mosque and somebody kills them, he's a martyr. But Jolani, not calling them a martyr, means he considers them below the Muslims who could be martyrs, but the Christians not. And the second thing is, how would Jolani even call them martyrs if he himself sent car bombs to the Christian and Shia neighborhoods and killed many people in the past? This means he's also a terrorist. He's calling himself a terrorist. And that's why the Patriarch Yazji, when he gave the speech, and I could send you the speech now, so you could probably, if you want to show it later to your audience, he dared to criticize Jolani. And he said, you called us on a phone, that's not enough. You didn't even declare 3 days of mourning for our martyrs. You didn't call them martyrs. So he said, if there is anyone who should declare 3 days of mourning, you should declare a mourning over the government, which means the government is dead. And he challenged him in the church. And this led into a huge backlash against him. And all the minions and mouthpieces of Jolani waged a brutal campaign against him, against Patriarch Yazji. And I fear, and I believe, that they will kill him eventually. They will kill him, but they will not kill him themselves, just like they did with the church. They will send a lone wolf. It's not going to be someone this time from the government. And they will say, this criminal person killed the patriarch. They will capture him and they will make a theater. They will make a video of him being captured. We brought justice. But the real issue is they will eliminate him because they will bring someone else in his position. And I hear, those are my sources, I could be wrong, that they're preparing someone in the United States who is a Christian Zionist to bring him to Damascus to replace him. So this could be a record for the people to see if this happens in the future.
Okay, Kevork, I just want to make sure I'm following. Okay, so 1946, more or less, would be the start of independence. It was the end of the French Mandate and the defeat of the Ottomans. And around 1970, Assad Sr. Took control. He became the president. And around 2000, Assad Jr. Became president. During the Assad presidency, because the West likes to say regime, they always say regime when it's a government they don't like. The mainstream narrative is that Syria was very unstable and it was oppressive and it was authoritarian and it was a horrible place to live. You're saying the opposite, that it was stable and it was a good, safe place to live. With that in mind, the rise of Islamism, is that a word? Islamism?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a word, but let's use it.
Yeah.
Is that related then to US foreign interests and, of course, by extension, Israeli foreign interests to destabilize the region?
So people may say Kevork is biased. He's not objective. Google him. His Wikipedia says he's an Assadist. Right? Okay. Let's ask 7 million tourists who visited Syria in 2010. If Syria was unstable and Syria was a chaotic place where people are being beaten up in the streets, being sent to dungeons for having an opinion, or how can 7 million people risk themselves and come to Syria as visitors from all around the world. This is 2010. Syria, according to the Western pollings, was one of the safest places in the world. It was the safest place in the Middle East for people to come and visit. And it was the richest place for culturally, historically, for the people to come and visit the country. I studied in Paris in 2010, and with me, I brought a friend from France to visit Syria. And she said, I believe you. I have never been to Syria. In the press, they would say, don't go, but I will go with you. And she came to Syria and visited it for 15 days, and she was fascinated. Now, the rise of the Islamists, Islamism, right? This is something that goes back to the Brits, not to the Americans. The Brits, they're the ones who created this Muslim Brotherhood movement in the region, or helped in the creation of the Muslim Brotherhood. Because in the 1920s, in the mid-1920s, when the Brits used to be in the occupation in Egypt, the people who fought against the British occupation were the nationalists and the socialists. So how do you find a domestic rift and domestic enemy to the nationalists and socialists? Who is the natural enemy of nationalism and socialism in the region? They are the Islamists. So they have helped the creation of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt by, I will remember his name now, and they have started this movement from Egypt to divide and conquer the region. Now, the Americans are the successor of the British Empire, and they have learned a lot from them. And they have just taken the script and they applied it in different places, one of which is in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan was the test for this formula, and it worked. Hillary Clinton says this was an amazing plan. We defeated the Soviet Union. We sent thousands of brainless jihadists from all around the world, trained them, gave them the money. We have a good ally like Saudi Arabia financing all this. And then we tasked Saudi Arabia to build what is called madrasas. Madrasa in Arabic means school. And madrasas are the plural of schools. And Saudi Arabia built religious schools in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Central Asia, Middle East, thousands of them. What is the purpose of these religious schools is to indoctrinate and radicalize the youth. So this was not something like a misjudgment. This was a deliberate policy to radicalize the Muslim youth through indoctrination, through petrodollar, which Saudi Arabia played a major role. After the Arab Spring, it was Qatar who played the major role in the radicalization of the people. So this is not something like the Americans made a mistake in Afghanistan. This was a deliberate policy. Because if this was a mistake, and you consider it a mistake, you will not copy this script again in Syria or in Afghanistan or in Chechnya or in Bosnia and in different places around the world. This is a useful strategy against the enemies of the United States, turning these brainless, radicalized, young, aggressive, angry at life people into ticking bombs against the enemies of the United States. And this has been the case also in Syria. We had tens of thousands of multinational terrorists coming to Syria to fight against who, they say, the infidel Assad regime. Okay. What about Palestine, my friend? Why don't they go also to Palestine, if that is the case? If Jerusalem is the fourth most important holy site in Islam, why don't they go and liberate Jerusalem? Why is it that Al-Qaeda has never attacked Israel? Why is it that ISIS never attacked Israel? Why is it most of the victims are the people of the Levant and not the Americans or the Israelis per se? And I'm not calling for attacks against them, because if at any historical juncture I find myself between only two powers, ISIS and America, I will definitely find myself on the side of America. I'm not going to be with ISIS. But what I'm saying is, they are moving ISIS on the chessboard. And this reminds me of what Professor Michael Hudson said in this case. He said, Al-Qaeda is basically a contract army for the United States. They founded it in Afghanistan, and they moved it into different places to break status quos. When there is a status quo that you don't like, you have to break it. You need these chaotic and terroristic elements to break the status quo so you can reform a new reality or a new status quo, which is more unfavorable to you. And this is the problem. This is a huge problem. This problem is not like people believe in Islam. The problem is the Islamism that you said, which is imposing your way of life and your understanding of what Islam is on the rest of the people. And this is where you will find me pushing against it. And that's why they say I'm an Islamophobe, I'm a fascist. It's like, am I saying anything wrong in this? If Christians come, if the Roman Empire comes to Syria and tells to the 70% of the people, I will basically send you into concentration camp, put you inside cages. I will burn your women. I will rape your women. I will take them as sex slaves if you don't convert to Christianity. Do you think we're going to do this podcast and say, that's amazing, or we're going to push against it? So today, when we speak today, my friend, even the mainstream press say that tens and tens of Alawite women are kidnapped by the Jolani thugs. There are daily kidnappings of women in Syria for slavery. This is worse than a jungle, right? Like, do people understand the gravity of the issue? Like, a woman takes a taxi or a van and going to her school, and then take the woman, and they call her parents, and they mock her parents, saying, your woman is with us and you will never see her again. And they rape her over and over again. These jihadists come 7 people, 8 people, 9 people. This is the situation now in the country. Is this really the freedom we were promised? It is not.
And under both Assads, was Syria a secular country?
So the definition of secularism in Europe and in the West is different from what secularism means in Syria. And nowadays, secularism in the West is also, some people would say, an indication that it is anti-religion. Like they're trying to destroy the church. And they're trying to destroy the church. They're trying to destroy Christianity in the West. I can see it with my objective eyes. I have nothing against the people who are gays or lesbians at all. Zero. I don't even care what people believe in their sexual aspirations, right? Or what they want to do. As long as don't come to the kids, I'm fine. You do it in private. Don't come to the kids, leave the kids alone. But when you see in the church, for example, in Germany, the priest is carrying the LGBT flag and walking with his people, I would say this is not Christian, right? This is anti-Christian. Anyways, in Syria, secularism meant that every religious and sectarian group would have its rights to practice its rituals without the state intervention into their religious affairs. And this is the secularism which existed under both Assad the father and Assad the son until the last day. And it also meant one more thing, which is the suppression of any group in Syria which comes and tries to impose its religious views on the rest. So this is something important. If you have, say, 2% or 3% or 5% of Syrians believe that they have to convert all other people into their own religion, then this is when the state used to intervene to put them in their place. That you practice yours, they practice theirs. So this is the secularism which existed in Syria, which no longer exists nowadays. Syria is now the opposite of what it used to be in the past, and it's going to get worse. Yeah, it is going to get worse. Because once you empty the society, so you had like a 15-20% Christians, you emptied them from the country, and now you're coming after the Alawites, and they're leaving the country en masse, going to Lebanon, they're going to Europe. So you're emptying your country anyways from its the real multiculturalism, not the engineered multiculturalism, not the imposed multiculturalism on the people. You are destroying that and creating a one state and one colored state. Something that, ironically, the West says that we have to accept multiculturalism. And even if you don't like multiculturalism, you must, or you're a fascist. And then in Syria, they establish a one-color country. Like, the contradiction is, it angers me, because then you see someone like Annalena Baerbock trying to shake hands with Jolani, and Jolani doesn't even give her his hand. Do you understand how absurd it is for a minister to call herself a feminist and says, or used to say, because she's now out of government, the same thing goes for Kaya Kallas and the rest of this, sorry to say, clowns, who say, we're a feminist foreign policy, we're there for feminism, we're there for women. And then they go to Damascus, they give their hand to Jolani, and Jolani doesn't even shake hands with them. And they say, everything is okay in Syria, we lift the sanctions, we give them 200 million euros aid to govern themselves. What is this? I mean, you tell me, what is this? This is the beyond absurdity, something that even I don't have words in my dictionary to describe. It's horrendous.
You kind of sidelined this, but what is the involvement of Israel, or shall we say Zionism, in Syria?
Actually, one of the main considerations, one of the main reasons why the United States initiated the regime change operation in Syria was for Israel. The United States is how many 10,000 kilometers away? How many thousand kilometers away from Syria? There is no Syrian army didn't pose any threat to the United States. In the contrary, Syria cooperated with the United States in the war against terrorism, against Al-Qaeda, against this radicalism in the region. But it was Israel, because Israel wanted for Syria to sign the normalization deal. And Syria, after Egypt, was the only Arab country in the region capable of keeping the Arabic people in a position that they reject normalization. They reject the political entity of Israel. So under both Hafez and Bashar, they always called Israel a Zionist entity, which means they don't recognize the legitimacy of Israel as a political entity. And they, after Egypt left the Arab-Israeli conflict, they signed the Accords, the Camp David Accords. Syria stayed alone in the Arabic country against Israel. So Syria, with limited resources, they cannot fight against Israel, which receives full backing of the United States. So they coordinated with Iran to support and aid and train and equip non-state actors in the region to open small front lines against Israel, to keep Israel in its borders. Because Israel always had these expansionist aspirations in the region, to the extent that in 1982, Israeli soldiers were drinking beer in Beirut. They were in Beirut. So if you are in Beirut, 1.5 hours away, you're in Damascus. How does that make you feel when there is a country expanding in the region this way? So they created these conflict zones against Israel to keep them busy fighting against these non-state actors. And those non-state actors, they had also legitimate grievances because their territories in Lebanon were occupied. Entire southern Lebanon to Beirut was occupied by Israel. So Syria and Iran gave them weapons to fight against them, and they managed and succeeded to kick the Israeli occupation forces out of Lebanon in the year 2000. And the same goes to Palestine. And many of the weapons that nowadays the pro-Palestine camp are proud of, they came either from Syria or passed through Syria, right? So this was the situation that Israel saw that they have to solve it, because they will create one state only for the Israelis. There is no two-state solution, and they want to have the freedom of action in the region, which is Syria is a major obstacle and the supporter of these resistance groups. And that's why they wanted to knock out Assad, and not for its authoritarianism or democracy or human rights. Those are all BS. You know it, my friend. So they came after him. They removed him from power. And what's the result now? Palestine is gone. Anyone who thinks there is going to be Palestine under such circumstances is delusional.
Greater
Palestine
Israel.
is gone. Greater Israel. Israel now exists also in southern Lebanon, and Hezbollah doesn't push them back because they don't have supply chains with Syria, and they're cut off from the Iran and Iraq, so they lost the strategic depth. They're isolated. The same goes for Palestinian armed factions. And now Israel can fly its fighter jets all the way to the borders on the Syrian airspace, something that was unimaginable under Assad. Since 2018, last time Israel tried to penetrate the Syrian airspace, the Syrian army shot it down, an F-16. And since then, Israel never penetrated the Syrian airspace. Now the Syrian airspace is like is open for Israel. They fly every day. They go all the way to the borders with Iraq. They go from Syria to northern Iraq to the Kurdistan region, and they bomb inside Iran. They have won this war. Israel won this war. The United States won this strategic conflict in the region. In the future, there could be a pushback, there could be a resistance. It's always possible, and it will be. But now I'm saying, as we speak now, they have emerged victorious. We have to accept this reality. Otherwise, if you say, no, we emerged victorious and they lost, means you don't have to do anything about it if you don't accept the defeat, right? Because if you don't accept the defeat, you don't work for victory in the future. So the Syrians have lost, the Lebanese have lost, the Palestinians have lost in this. Iranians, they have preserved their territorial integrity, their sovereignty, their nuclear enrichment, but they have lost their allies. Big time. So there is no longer axis of resistance in the region. There is Iran, there is Yemen. Those are very far away, separate powers. They coordinate with each other. But there is no longer strategic depth represented by Syria. There is no longer Hezbollah as a regional power, basically posing a serious threat against Israel, because they don't have an access now to weapon markets. And the same goes for the Palestinians. You're watching the footage coming from Gaza. They're killing Palestinians now as a sport, for fun. There is no need to kill malnutrition, the poor and hungry kids going to collect food. But they can do it because they can. Because they can, and nobody cares, and nobody will bring them to justice. But before, you had an Axis trying to counter this. They made huge mistakes. I don't want to get into so much details, and I criticized them enough in the past weeks for really adopting this, what they call the strategic patience. Strategic patience led into the crumbling of the axis of resistance, or what used to be called. I also noticed that it wasn't really an axis because they didn't really act as organic one body, but rather they had differences among them. Iran wanted to lead from the back and not from the front. And many actors in this axis of resistance were upset by that. If you're the leader of the axis, just like the United States is the leader of that axis, United States leads. Doesn't come in the background. United States leads. But Iran didn't lead. It wanted to lead from the back and wanted for the other actors to carry out the hostilities. And this was a major, huge mistake, which I think killed, let's say, this axis for now.
How can I follow your work?
First of all, thank you so much, my friend, for having me on the show. I'm posting daily live streamings between Monday to Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern American time, 5 p.m. Central European time on my YouTube channel and Rumble. Syriana analysis. That's the only two places I post. And my personal X account is Kevork Almassian, my personal name, where I shorter videos, shorter commentaries, etc.
And before I say goodbye, I'm going to insist that you come and stay with me in South Africa in the near future.
I will definitely do that. I would be more than happy to do that.
All right, Kevork Almassian, thank you for joining me in the trenches.